$5,000 to support the operation of the system. Construction of the new school started in July of 1889. Stone was taken from the Days River Quarry. The foundation wasn't completed until 1890. The workers worked over New Year's Day so that the students could occupy the new building the next day. Now there's commitment to education. In 1892, the former little schoolhouse, which was the first one before the new one was built, was moved down to 4th Street in Wisconsin to serve as the First Ward School. Anybody here attend the First Ward School? Oh, yes. Okay. The large and populous part of the city.
And the best part.
The best part, someone says, yeah. Then in 1899, it was moved and replaced with a two-story building. The little schoolhouse was then used as a night school. In 1894, exactly 100 years ago, the first class to graduate had only 5 students. The class motto was, "They win who work." In 1906, when Gladstone was only 19 years old, Ivan E. Shelley was elected mayor, and this was his platform. He promised to end corruption in city government and close all the saloons. Shelley started a publication called The Messenger. Failure to fulfill his promises and achieve his goals cost him his chance for re-election. I don't know whether that was to clean up government or close the saloons. This resulted also in the discontinuation of The Messenger. Immigrants from Sweden, Belgium, Finland, and Germany were among the 4,211 residents of Gladstone, according to the 1910 census. Then as now, many people view Gladstone as a good place to live. Now, parenthetically, I have to interject this. Gladstone has had women on its city commission and school board for many years, with women acting as mayor and school board president. But did you know this? Did you know that the Gladstone schools had 3 women high school principals from 1899 to 1910? Hear it for the women. They were Florence Kellogg from 1899 to 1903, Miss Bradshaw from 1904 to 1905, and Catherine Sheridan from 1908 to 1911. Now note this. Also very significant is the fact that the superintendent of schools from 1897 to 1898 was Mrs. W.A. Campbell. Since football was the only active sport participated in during that era actively, we should say a few words about football. During this era, the first Gladstone football team was organized by Dr. Hardy Long of Gary, Indiana, sometime in 1898. He's regarded by most to be the father of Gladstone football, organizing his ragtag team with whatever materials they had at hand. For the lack of a football, they had to use a cap. They practiced their plays at night in light provided by the arc light in the yard of the Howard Inn. It wasn't said whether they went into the inn afterwards or not. They selected purple as their team color and were ready for their first game, or so they thought. White was later added to distinguish the high school team from the city team. For their first game ever, Escanaba came to town for a day of competition. Unfortunately, the brave signals were so simple that the Escanaba team knew what they were about to do before they did it. This contributed, as you might expect, to a 45-0 loss in the first game. But it gets more interesting than this. For the second game, we traveled to Escanaba in covered wagons. It was Thanksgiving Day, and the team munched their Thanksgiving dinner as they made their way over the bluff and forged the Escanaba River. This was quite a long trip for a horse-drawn vehicle. And the result was not too favorable either, because during the game, a Gladstone player made an end run toward his own goal line. Fortunately, his teammates dragged him down before he could score. So his name does not live in infamy. The final score in this game was 34-0 in favor of Escanaba, so we were moving in the right direction. The Gladstone team thought that new uniforms might help, so they bought them for the 1899 season. The average cost of these new uniforms was $3 apiece. Next season, there was a moral victory. We scored our first ever touchdown against Escanaba. Though we lost that game, we had our first victory later in the season against Manistee. On October 26, 1899, a memorable day, we defeated the Manistee team in their first game with a score of 21-0. Then the magic moment arrived. We beat Escanaba in 1901. On a cool September day, we walked away from the field with an 11-0 victory. Highlights of the next several games against Escanaba were as follows. In 1903, Gladstone 5, Escanaba 5. In 1905, believe it or not, the same score. And finally, in 1907, Gladstone 17, Escanaba 6. Many enjoyable athletic moments would take place in future years.
Yeah, let's not go too hot. That's here.
That seemed very familiar to me, just like yesterday. Now we're going to do a little something between the decades. We want to collect some demographic data as we do a little demographic study, but also it'll give some of you a chance to stand up and stretch a little. So what we're going to do while people are changing costumes is ask for some people to stand. First of all, would all former and present teachers of the school system stand? Nice turnout. Now this is really my good fortune. This makes the effort worthwhile for me. It's my pleasure to be able to talk this afternoon with the representative from the decade of 1910 to 1919 to Mrs. Sadie Anderson Cagle. She was 100 years young on May 7, 1994. She is our oldest living graduate, being a member of the graduating class of 1913. Isn't that nice? Now, because she was going to come and chat with me this afternoon and chat with the rest of you, she was kind enough to put on her graduation dress for us. Isn't this lovely? Such a beautiful dress. I think some of you might want to come down and look at that later. We're not going to ask any of you whether you can get into your graduation dresses or suits, but here's someone 100 years young who can. I'm going to have the privilege of asking Mrs. Cagle a few questions here. Would you tell us what some of the school buildings were like when you attended school, please?
Well, we had nice studio rooms where we go study, and then in the hall we used to play games and have parties, and in the kindergarten we had parties. Master Superintendent Wilman would dance the Virginia Reel with us.
Did you hear that, Dr. Burton? We expect dances in the hall next year with you doing the Virginia Wheel. Mrs. Cagle, what was transportation like for the students? I suppose they all had their own cars or some form of transportation to get to school?
Everybody walked. We had 4 students walk from Kipling every morning, and they'd get there about 8:30 before I got to school. 4 of my classmates lived in Kipling, so sometimes 2 of my classmates, we would walk to Kipling to visit these friends, and we enjoyed that very much.
Young people, did you hear that? We oldsters aren't making these stories of hardship up, you see. Would you tell us the classes that were your favorite when you were here at school?
Well, I had 2 years of German, and I liked that very much because we used to have German conversations. And I liked the bookkeeping classes. And I liked the English classes. We had Miss Aiken, and she married Floyd Marble.
Oh. We're going to get a good amount of history here that's important for us, so I hope we're getting this down.
And the bookkeeping teacher, she met Archie Harris. Miss Salter was her name.
Did this have a happy ending? Did they get married?
Lived in Gladstone. They lived in Gladstone.
Okay. What did you and the other students do for recreation and fun in those days?
Well, we used to hike up to the where the paper mill is. Escanaba River for our botany classes to analyze flowers and plants. And we used to do that real often. And we had a very good teacher, Mr. Gisa, I guess was our botany teacher. And he used to go with the whole gang up there. And we enjoyed that a lot. We'd walk up those 125 steps on the bluff, and that's when they walked to the river.
Okay, thank you. Now, do you have any other favorite memories of the school, like dances or things of that nature?
Well, that's all I can remember is our parties and dancing in the hall, and I would play the piano for the bunch. That's all. We never went to the public dances. We didn't go to public dances.
So most of the dances were in the hall?
Was at that time, and up and down the streets of Gladstone, merchants offered us treats, and Mr. Vogt allowed us to go into the theater and have cheers from the stage. We just kept walking and running and shouting, and I think it was a light snowfall late that afternoon that put an end to these festivities. However, I remember the next morning, we were to debate the St. Joseph High School team from Escanaba in the old assembly room in the old high school. I couldn't speak a word. High school games were so